Johnny, it's spring, and I thought we should do a monster film. So I chose from my sci-fi collection today one of my favorites, Universal's The Creature from the Black Lagoon, 1954. Now, this was a series of 3 films. The first one was The Creature from the Black Lagoon. This was Universal's one big hit monster. In the 40s, in 30s and 40s, they had created the Frankenstein monster for the movies and Dracula and the Wolfman. But in the 50s, they had one big hit monster, original monster, and it was this one. Sort of a throwback between a fish and a man, set in the Amazon jungles in a remote lagoon called the Black Lagoon. These movies at Universal, these horror films, were shot with the same sort of budgets they shot their regular A features with, so the cinematography was just great. And they had a guy named Jack Arnold who specialized in these science fiction movies in the 50s, and he was one of the very best in terms of pacing. This movie also had incredible underwater photography. It's a beautiful, beautiful movie. And Jack Arnold was smart enough to pull from King Kong and from Frankenstein the old Beauty and the Beast sort of underlying theme, which runs through all of these. Now, in the first one, the star is, the girl is played by Julie Adams, who was this beautiful contract player and jet black hair, had one of the best screams on the lot. And she was, as most of these women were, she is a scientist. She's stacked, she's got tight sweaters, and she's a scientist. Why, that's right out of the Devonian period. Why, to me, that looks like a Devonian skeleton. Look at this jungle. It's right out of the Devonian era. To create the creature's effect, which was really a brilliant costume. They had 2 actors. They had one guy who was shorter, who did all the swimming and underwater scenes, because they had to have somebody very, very agile. And they would go up and they'd give him, instead of having like an aqualung built into the costume, they would give him a hose and he'd take a couple breaths and they'd shoot a couple of stuff, and then he'd come back and exhale and they'd give him a couple more breaths, and that's how they filmed that. Then to film the on-land creature, they had this guy who was 6'4", and he was enormous. And they even had his costume so that the gills would go out. He has long claws, you know. And every time he appears, Hans Salter, who did the score of the music, would go, na na na, na na na, you know. He'd come down and he'd claw people to death. No. There's a high body count in this movie. But the suspense is really, really great. It makes a lot of sense. It builds up. And the reason the movie is so good is because these actors are such pros and they play it straight all the way down. They believe what they're doing, so you believe what they're doing.
Get back, Dave. Get back.
So the sequel, the next year in 55, was Revenge of the Creature. And this is, they kidnap the creature, and in this version, and they bring it to Marineland in Florida. It's really, really good. And this one has John Agar and this hottie named John Bromfield, he did mostly TV westerns, but this guy in a bathing suit is not to be believed. And they must have said, let's make that bathing suit a little smaller there, Johnny, shall we? You know, he is such a hottie. And the girl in this is Laurie Nelson. And she doesn't say Devonian period. Her thing is, I'm an ichthyologist. That's the study of fish.
I see.
You know, but she's stacked and blonde, and the creature loves her. And the creature, of course, jumps up out of the lagoon, and there's mass panic. People running in the 50s, and the little girl who's standing in front of the monster. Will the monster get the little girl? And the little mother throws herself over. And
monster?
The monster at one point picks up a car that's parked across the street and just lifts it, and the car just rolls down the beach, you know, end over end. It's really, really terrific. And somehow he always finds the girl, which I'm never quite sure why that happens. The effects are terrific. Again, Jack Arnold directed it, moves like clockwork. The last version was made the following year, and it was called The Creature Walks Among Us. They go down to they get the monster, they throw gasoline on him, and they burn him terribly. And they do an operation, and they make him as human as possible. And they find out that under the scales he has human skin.
I have burned away the outer scale. There's a structure of human skin underneath it.
So they bring him back, and now he can't really exist out of the water because he's so ugly, and he can't exist in the water, which because he still feels like a fish. So he's really poor. That you really feel sorry for him, and he goes on this rampage, of course, because he's a little ticked off that, you know, he's had this skin graft like Nip and Tuck. They didn't ask him their permission, and he kills a bunch of people. You tamper with God's territory. This is the kind of thing that happens, you know. And I kind of love the simplicity of the messages, and I love the look of the 50s. I love those girls. I love the screaming girls, but I love this monster. They were able to give him sort of a sensitivity, even though he's extremely ugly. They're absolutely fascinating. They move like clockwork, and I think you're going to love them. Creature from the Black Lagoon, Revenge of the Creature Walks Among Us. A little bit of monster for the spring. Mother?
Let's all go to the lodge. Let's all go to the lodge.
We always move like...
To get ourselves a treat.
Butchie.
Popcorn can't be beat.